people on lake shores and hillsides as well as in cities and villages, synagogues and temple, marketplaces, streets and houses. Mount 5. 1, 2. 26. 55. Mr. 6. 53-56. U4. 16. 5. 1-3. 13. 22, 26. 19. 5, 6, addressing large crowds and individuals, men and women, old and young, rich and poor. Mr. 3. 7, 8. 4. 1. Joe 3. 1-3. Mount 14. 21. 19. 21, 22. 11. 4, 5. The accompanying chart presents a suggested manner in which the four accounts of Jesus' earthly life can be coordinated chronologically. It also gives an understanding of the various campaigns or tours he carried out during his ministry of 3.5 years. Jesus set an example for his disciples by being hard-working, rising early, serving on into the night. Luke 21. 37, 38. Mr. 11. 20. 1. 32-34. Joe 3. 2. 5. 17. More than once he spent the night in prayer, as he did the night before giving the Sermon on the Mount. Mount 14. 23-25. Luke 6. 12. 7. 10. Another time, after serving during the night, he rose while it was still dark and headed for a lonely place to pray. Mr. 1. 32, 35. His privacy often interrupted by the crowds, he, nevertheless, received them kindly and began to speak to them about the kingdom of God. Luke 9. 10, 11. Mr. 6. 31-34. 7. 24-30. He experienced tiredness, thirst, and hunger, at times foregoing food for the sake of the work to be done. Mount 21. 18. Joe 4. 6, 7, 31-34. O texto e acute miritra longo. Jesus Christ 69 others. Jesus was a fighter for God's cause and on behalf of lovers of righteousness. As the promised seed, he had to face the enmity of the seed of the serpent, doing battle with them. Ge 3. 15. 22. 17. He waged offensive warfare against the demons and their influence on men's minds and hearts. Mr. 5. 1-13. U4. 32-36. 11. 19-26. Compare to Cur 4. 3, 4. F6. 10-12. Hypocritical religious leaders showed they were actually in opposition to God's sovereignty and will. Mount 23. 13, 27, 28. Luke 11. 53, 54. Joe 19. 12-16. Jesus thoroughly defeated them in a series of verbal encounters. He wielded the sword of the Spirit, God's word, with strength, perfect control, and strategy, cutting through subtle arguments and trap-like questions that his opposers advanced, putting them in a corner or on the horns of a dilemma. Mount 21. 23-27. 22. 15-46. He fearlessly exposed them for what they were. Teachers of human traditions and formalisms, blind leaders, a generation of vipers, and children of God's adversary, who is the prince of the demons and a murderous liar. Mount 15. 12-14. 21. 33-41, 45, 46. 23. 33-35. Mr. 7. 1-13. Joe 8. 40-45. In all of this, Jesus was never foolhardy, sought no trouble, and avoided unnecessary danger. Mount 12. 14, 15. Mr. 3. 6, 7. Joe 7. 1, 10. 11. 53, 54. Compare Mount 10. 16, 17, 28-31. His courage was based on faith. Mr. 4. 37-40. He did not lose control of himself but remained calm when vilified and mistreated, committing himself to the one who judges righteously. 1 Pe 2. 23. By his courageous fight for the truth and by bringing light to the people concerning God's purpose, Jesus, as one greater than Moses, fulfilled the prophetic role of liberator. He proclaimed freedom to the captives. Isra 42. 1, 6, 7. J 30. 8-10. Isra 61. 1. Though many held back for selfish reasons and out of fear of the element in power. Joe 7. 11-13. 9. 22. 12. 42, 43. Others gained courage to break free of their chains of ignorance and slavish subservience to false leaders and false hopes. Joe 9. 24-39. Compare 5. 1. As faithful Judean kings had waged campaigns to eliminate false worship from the realm. 2 Ch 15. 8. 17. 1, 4-6. 2 Chi 18. 1, 3-6. So, 2, the ministry of Jesus, God's messianic king, had a devastating effect on false religion in his day. Joe 11. 47, 48. For further information regarding the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ, see Maps, Volume 2, pages 540, 541. Depth of feeling and warmth. But Jesus was also a man of great feeling, a requirement for serving as God's high priest. His perfection did not make him hypocritical or arrogant and overbearing as were the Pharisees toward the imperfect, sin-laden persons among whom he lived and worked. Mount 9. 10-13. 21. 31, 32. Lu 7. 36-48. 15. 1-32. 18. 9-14. Even children could feel at ease with him, and when using a child as an example, he did not merely stand the child before his disciples, but also put his arms around it. Mr. 9. 36. 10. 13-16. He proved himself a real friend and affectionate companion to his followers, loving them to the end. Joe 13. 1. 15. 11-15. He did not use his authority to be demanding and to add to the people's burdens but, rather, said, "Come to me, all you who are toiling. I will refresh you." His disciples found him mild-tempered and lowly in heart, his yoke kindly and his load light. Mount 11. 28-30. Priestly duties included care for the physical and spiritual health of the people. Le 13-15. Pity and compassion moved Jesus to help the people suffering from illness, blindness, and other afflictions. Mount 9. 36. 14. 14. 20. 34. Lu 7. 11-15. Compare Issa 61. 1. The death of his friend Lazarus and the resulting grief to Lazarus' sisters caused Jesus to groan and give way to tears. Joe 11. 32-36. Thus, in an anticipatory way, Jesus the Messiah carried the sicknesses and bore the pains of others, doing so at the cost of power from himself. Isra 53. 4. Lu 8. 43-48. He did textually acute miritra longo, Jesus Christ 70 questions and issues, and by showing the solution to problems of daily living. The well-known Sermon on the Mount is a prime example of this. Mount 5-7. In it his counsel showed the way to true happiness, how to settle quarrels, how to avoid immorality, how to deal with those showing enmity, the way to practice righteousness free from hypocrisy, the right attitude toward the material things of life, confidence in God's generosity, the golden rule for right relationships with others, the means for detecting religious frauds, and how to build for a secure future. The crowds were astounded at his way of teaching. For he was teaching them as a person having authority, and not as their scribes. Mount 7. 28, 29. After his resurrection he continued to be the key figure in Jehovah's channel of communication to mankind. Re 1. 1. Master Teacher. His manner of teaching was remarkably effective. Joe 7. 45, 46. He presented matters of great weight and depth with simplicity, brevity, and clarity. He illustrated his points with things well known to his listeners. Mount 13. 34, 35. To fishermen. Mount 13. 47, 48. Shepherds. Joe 10. 1-17. Farmers. Mount 13. 3-9. Builders. Mount 7. 24-27. Lu 14. 28-30. Merchants. Mount 13. 45, 46. Slaves or masters. Lu 16. 1-9. Housewives. Mount 13. 33. Lu 15. 8, or anyone else. Mount 6. 26-30. Simple things, like bread, water, salt, wineskins, old garments, were used as symbols of things of great importance, even as they were so used in the Hebrew scriptures. Joe 6. 31-35, 51. 4. 13, 14. Mount 5. 13. Lu 5. 36-39. His logic, often expressed through analogies, cleared away misguided objections and put matters in their proper perspective. Mount 16. 1-3. Lu 11. 11-22. 14. 1-6. He aimed his message primarily at men's hearts, using penetrating questions to cause them to think, arrive at their own conclusions, examine their motives, and make decisions. Mount 16. 5-16. 17. 24-27. 26. 52-54. Mr. 3. 1-5. Lu 10. 25-37. Joe 18. 11. He did not strive to win over the masses, but endeavored to awaken the hearts of those sincerely hungering for truth and righteousness. Mount 5. 3, 6. 13. 10-15. Though considerate of the limited understanding of his audience, and even of his disciples. Mr. 4. 33. And, though using discernment in how much information to give them. Joe 16. 4, 12. He never watered down God's message in an effort to gain popularity or curry favor. His speech was straightforward, even blunt at times. Mount 5. 37. Lu 11. 37-52. Joe 7. 19. 8. 46, 47. The theme of his message was, repent, for the kingdom of the heavens has drawn near. Mount 4. 17. As did Jehovah's prophets of early times, he plainly told the people of their revolt, and the house of Jacob of their sins. Isla 58. 1. Mount 21. 28-32. Joe 8. 24, pointing them to the narrow gate and the cramped road that would lead them back to God's favor and life. Mount 7. 13, 14. Leader and Commander. Jesus demonstrated his qualifications as a leader and commander as well as a witness to the national groups. Isla 55. 3, 4. Mount 23. 10. Joe 14. 10, 14. Compare 1-6. 13, 14. When the time came for it, several months after beginning his ministry, he went to certain people already known to him and gave them the invitation. Be my follower. Men abandoned fishing businesses and tax office employment to respond without hesitation. Mount 4. 18-22. Lu 5. 27, 28. Compare PS 110. 3. Women contributed time, effort, and material possessions to supply the needs of Jesus and his followers. Mr. 15. 40, 41. Lu 8. 1-3. This small group formed the nucleus of what would become a new nation, spiritual Israel. 1 Pe 2. 7-10 Jesus spent an entire night praying for his Father's guidance before selecting 12 apostles, who, if faithful, would become pillars in that new nation, like the 12 sons of Jacob in fleshly Israel. Lu 6. 12-16. F2. 20. Re 21. 14 As Moses had 70 men associated with him as representatives of the nation, Jesus later assigned 70 more disciples o textoi acute miritra longo, Jesus Christ 71 years. 1 Pe 5. 1-4 Thus, Jesus, in the short span of 3.5 years, laid the sound foundation for a unified international congregation with thousands of members drawn from many races. Able provider and righteous judge. That his rule would bring prosperity surpassing that of Solomon's was evident from his ability to direct the fishing operations of his disciples with overwhelming success. Bu 5. 4-9. Compare Joe 21. 4-11. The feeding of thousands of persons by this man born in Bethlehem meaning house of bread, as well as his converting water into fine wine, was a small foretaste of the future banquet that God's messianic kingdom would provide for all the peoples. Isla 25. 6. Compare Lu 14. 15. His rule not only would end poverty and hunger, but would even result in the swallowing up of death. Isla 25. 7, 8. There was every reason, as well, to trust in the justice and righteous judgment his government would bring, in harmony with the messianic prophecies. Isra 11. 3-5. 32. 1, 2. 42. 1 He showed the utmost respect for Lord, particularly that of his God and Father, but also for that of the superior authorities allowed to operate on earth in the form of secular governments. Row 13. 1. Mount 5. 17-19. 22. 17-21. Joe 18. 36 He rejected the effort to inject him into the current political scene by making him king through popular acclaim. Joe 6. 15. Compare Lu 19. 11, 12. Ac 1. 6-9. He did not overstep the bounds of his authority. Lu 12. 13, 14 No one could convict him of sin. It was not merely because he has been born perfect but because he exercised constant care to observe God's word. Joe 8. 46, 55 Righteousness and faithfulness girded him like a belt. Isra 11. 5 His love of righteousness was coupled with a hatred of wickedness, hypocrisy, and fraud, as well as indignation toward those who were greedy and callous toward the sufferings of others. Mount 7. 21-27. 23. 1-8, 25-28. Mr. 3. 1-5. 12. 38-40. Compare VSS 41-44. Meek and lowly ones could take heart, because his rule would wipe out injustice and oppression. Isra 11. 4. Mount 5. 5. He showed keen discernment of principles, of the real meaning and purpose of God's laws, emphasizing the weightier matters thereof, justice and mercy and faithfulness. Mount 12. 1-8. 23. 23, 24 He was impartial, displaying no favoritism, even though he felt particular affection for one of his disciples. Mount 18. 1-4. Mr. 10. 35-44. Joe 13. 23. Compare 1 Pe 1. 17. Though one of his last acts, while dying on the torture stake, was to show concern for his human mother, his fleshly family ties never took priority over his spiritual relationships. Mount 12. 46-50. Lu 11. 27, 28. Joe 19. 26, 27 As foretold, his handling of problems was never superficial, based on any mere appearance to his eyes, nor was his reproof simply according to the thing heard by his ears. Isra 11. 3. Compare Job 7. 24. He was able to see into men's hearts, discern their thinking, reasoning, and motives. Mount 9. 4. Mr. 2. 6-8. Job 2. 23-25. And he kept his ear tuned to God's word and sought, not his own will, but that of his Father. This assured that, as God's appointed judge, his decisions would always be right and righteous. Isra 11. 4. Job 5. 30. Outstanding prophet. Jesus fulfilled the requirements of a prophet like, but greater than, Moses. The 18. 15, 18, 19. Mount 21. 11. Luke 24. 19. Act 3. 19-23. Compare Job 7. 40. He foretold his own sufferings and manner of death, the scattering of his disciples, the siege of Jerusalem, and the utter destruction of that city and its temple. Mount 20. 17-19. 24. 1. 25. 46. 26. 31-34. Luke 19. 41-44. 21. 20-24. Job 13. 18-27, 38. In connection with these latter events, he included prophecies to be fulfilled at the time of his presence, when his kingdom would be in active operation. And, like the earlier prophets, he performed signs and miracles as evidence from God that he was divinely sent. His credentials surpass those of Otextoi Acute Mirita Longo, the 72 sheep to the slaughtering, submitting to trials, being slapped, hit with fists, spit on, scourged with a whip, and finally, nailed to a stake between criminals. Isra 53. 7. Mount 26. 67, 68. 27. 26-38. Mr. 14. 65. 15. 15-20. Job 19. 1. By his sacrificial death he exemplified and expressed God's love toward men. Row 5. 8-10. F2. 4, 5. And enabled men to have absolute belief in his own unbreakable love for his faithful disciples. Row 8. 35-39. 1 Job 3. 16-18. Since the portrait of God's Son obtainable through the written record, admittedly brief Job 21. 25, is grand, the reality must have been far grander. His heartwarming example of humility and kindness, coupled with strength for righteousness and justice, gives assurance that his kingdom government will be all that men of faith through the centuries have longed for, in fact, that it will surpass their highest expectations. Row 8. 18-22. In all respects he exemplified the perfect standard for his disciples, one far different from that of worldly rulers. Mount 20. 25-28. 1 Co 11. 1. 1 Pe 2. 21. He, their Lord, washed their feet. Thus, he set the pattern of thoughtfulness, consideration, and humility that would characterize his congregation of anointed followers, not only on earth but also in heaven. Job 13. 3-15. Though having on their thrones and sharing all authority in heaven and earth with Jesus during Christ's 1,000-year reign, they must humbly care for and lovingly serve the needs of his subjects on earth. Mount 28. 18. Row 8. 17. 1 Pe 2. 9. Re 1. 5, 6. 20. 6. 21. 2-4. Declared righteous and worthy. By his entire life course of integrity to God, including his sacrifice, Jesus Christ accomplished the one act of justification that proved him qualified to serve as God's anointed king-priest in heaven. Row 5. 17, 18. By his resurrection from the dead to life as a heavenly Son of God, he was declared righteous in spirit. 1 T3. 16. Heavenly creatures proclaimed him worthy to receive the power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing, as one who was both lamb-like in behalf of justice and judgment, and also lamb-like in giving himself as a sacrifice for the saving of others. 5. 5-13 He had accomplished his primary purpose of sanctifying his Father's name. Mount 6. 9. 22. 36-38 This he did, not just by using that name, but by revealing the person it represents, displaying his Father's splendid qualities. His love, wisdom, justice, and power. Enabling persons to know or experience what God's name stands for. Mount 11. 27. Joe 1. 14, 18. 17. 6-12 And above all, he did it by upholding Jehovah's universal sovereignty, showing that his own kingdom government would be based solidly on that supreme source of authority. Therefore it could be said of him, God is your throne forever. Hajj 1. 8. The Lord Jesus Christ is thus the chief agent and perfecter of our faith. By his fulfillment of prophecy and his revelation of God's future purposes, as well as by what he said and did and was, he provided the solid foundation on which true faith must rest. Hajj 12. 2. 11. 1. Jethah from a root meaning more than enough. Overflow. 1. Moses' father-in-law Jethro is called Jethah in the Masoretic text at Exodus 4. 18. See Jethro. 2. A descendant of Judah through Perez. Jethah died without sons. 1 Ch 2. 4, 5, 25, 26, 28, 32. 3. The first named son of Ezra. Descendant of Judah. 1 Ch 4. 17. 4. A descendant of Asher. 1 Ch 7. 30, 38 He is likely the same as Ithran in verse 37. The names are quite similar in Hebrew. 5. The firstborn son of Gideon. Jethah apparently accompanied his father in the pursuit and capture of the Midianite kings Zebah and Zalmunna, but when ordered to slay them, the young Jethah feared to draw his sword. JG 8. 20 After Gideon died, Jethah was killed by his half-brother Abimelech. JG 9. 5, 18. 6. Father of David's one-time army chief Amasa. 1 Kai 2. 5, 32 Second O text to acute miritra longo, Us 73 Worship of Jehovah God. But Jethro's ancestors may have had true worship inculcated in them, and some of this perhaps continued in the family. His conduct suggests at least a deep respect for the God of Moses and Israel. X 18. 10-12. Jethro's association with his future son-in-law began shortly after Moses fled from Egypt in 1553 BCE. Moses assisted Jethro's daughters in watering their father's flocks, and this they reported to their father, who, in turn, extended hospitality to Moses. Moses then took up living in Jethro's household and eventually married his daughter Zipporah. After some 40 years of caring for Jethro's flocks in the vicinity of Mount Horeb Sinai, Moses was summoned by Jehovah back to Egypt, and he returned with his father-in-law's good wishes. X 2. 15-22. 3. 1. 4. 18. Acts 7. 29, 30. Later Jethro received report of Jehovah's great victory over the Egyptians, and at once he came to Moses at Horeb, bringing along Zipporah and Moses' 2 sons. It was indeed a very warm reunion. Jethro responded to Moses' review of Jehovah's mighty saving acts by blessing God and confessing, "Now I do know that Jehovah is greater than all the other gods." He then offered up sacrifices to the true God. X 18. 1-12 The next day, Jethro observed Moses listening to the problems of the Israelites from the morning till the evening. Perceiving how exhausting it was for both Moses and the people, Jethro suggested a system of delegating authority. Train other capable and worthy men as chiefs over tens, 50s, hundreds, and thousands to decide cases, so that you will hear only what they cannot handle. Moses agreed, and later Jethro returned to his own land. X 18. 13-27. Jethro's son Hobab was requested by Moses to be a scout. Apparently with some persuasion, He responded, and some of his people entered the promised land with Israel. New 10. 29-33 Judges 4. 11 calls Hobab the father-in-law of Moses rather than his brother-in-law, and this has caused difficulty in understanding. However, the Hebrew expression normally rendered father-in-law can in a broader sense denote any male relative by marriage and so could also be understood as brother-in-law. To say that Hobab instead of Jethro was Moses' father-in-law would disagree with other texts. If Hobab were another name for Jethro, as some suggest, it would also mean that two men, father and son, bore the name Hobab. On the other hand, Hobab, as a leading member of the next generation of Kenites, might be used in this text as a representative of his father. See Hobab. Jeturgitai, the son of Ishmael Ge 25. 13-15. 1 ch 1. 31 and forefather of a people against whom the Israelites warred. 1 ch 5. 18, 19 It is possible that Jetor's descendants were the Echurians. Lu 3. 1. Seirair. Joelgmiddle.ul. 1. Elvite who helped in cleansing the temple during Hezekiah's reign. A descendant of Elizaphan. 2 ch 29. 13, 15, 16. 2. A post-exilic resident of Jerusalem. Head of the Judean paternal house of Zerah. 1 ch 9. 3-6, 9. Ge 46. 12. Jushjiash possibly, Mehilandade. 1. A son of Esau by his Hivite wife Oholibamah. Jush was born in Canaan, but later the family moved to Edom. Ge 36. 2, 5-8, 14, 18. 1 ch 1. 35. 2. A descendant of Benjamin. A warrior and founder of a tribal family. 1 ch 7. 6, 10. 3. A Gershonite Levite. Son of Shimei. As both Jush and his brother Beri had very few sons, their descendants in David's time merged to form one paternal house. 1 ch 23. 7, 10, 11. 4. The first named son of King Hobom, presumably by his wife Mahalath. Because Hobom loved a different wife more, Jush was passed up in the royal succession. 2 ch 11. 18-23. 5. A Benjamite. One of King Saul's descendants. 1 ch 8. 33, 39. Jersjias he has counseled advised. A family head in the tribe of Benjamin. Son of Shaharaim by his wife Hodesh. 1 ch 8. 1, 8-10. Jewess of belonging to Judah. A person belonging to textoi acute miritra longo, jewelry 74 scriptures such are distinguished at times by the term proselytes. Act 2. 10. 6. 5. 13. 43 The term Jewish is used at Acts 24. 24. When Jesus was a young child, the astrologers came, inquiring, "Where is the one-born King of the Jews?" Mount 2. 1, 2 On Jesus' torture stake Pilate put the title Jesus the Nazarene the King of the Jews. Joe 19. 19. Figurative use. The Apostle Paul, in arguing that the Jews were mistaken in their pride of fleshly descent and in relying on the works of the law to find favor with God, said, "For he is not a Jew who is one on the outside, nor is circumcision that which is on the outside upon the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one on the inside, and his circumcision is that of the heart by spirit, and not by a written code. The praise of that one comes, not from men, but from God." Row 2. 28, 29 Here Paul, by play on the meaning of the name Judah, shows that the real basis for praise from God is being a servant of God from the heart, by spirit. This argument parallels his reasoning in Romans chapter 4, that the true seed of Abraham are those with the faith of Abraham. He further points out that in the Christian congregation nationality is of no consequence, for there is neither Jew nor Greek Gentile. 3. 28 The resurrected Jesus Christ spoke to the congregation at Smyrna, comforting them with regard to the persecution they were receiving, to great extent at the hands of the Jews, saying, I know the blasphemy by those who say they themselves are Jews, and yet they are not but are a synagogue of Satan. Re 2. 9. Jewelry. See jewels and precious stones. Ornaments. Jewels and precious stones. A jewel may be a precious stone, a gem, a cut and polished precious or semi-precious stone, or a decorative ornament made of precious metal, principally gold or silver, set with such stones. Jewels have been worn by both men and women from early biblical days for purposes of adornment. Today the diamond, emerald, ruby, and sapphire are strictly considered to be precious stones, whereas other rare and beautiful stones are viewed as semi-precious. However, the Hebrew term rendered precious stone has a broader application, as is shown at Ezekiel 28. 12, 13. These precious stones are distinguished from other minerals chiefly because they are rare, beautiful, and durable. The first biblical reference to any precious stone is at Genesis 2. 11, 12, where Havilah is identified as a land containing good gold, bdellium gum and the onyx stone. Wealth was partially measured by one's possession of precious stones. Such kings as Solomon and Hezekiah apparently had them in great quantity. 1 Kai 10. 11. 2 Ch 9. 10. 32. 27 precious stones were given as gifts. 1 Kai 10. 2, 10. 2 Ch 9. 1, 9, might constitute part of war booty. 2 Sa 12. 29, 30. 1 Ch 20. 2, and, as among the ancient Tyrians, were used as articles of trade. Des 27. 16, 22. In an inspired dirge concerning the king of Tyre, Ezekiel stated, every precious stone was your covering, ruby, topaz and jasper, chrysolite, onyx and jade, sapphire, turquoise and emerald. And of gold was the workmanship of your settings and your sockets in you. Es 28. 12, 13. Symbolic Babylon the Great is represented as being richly adorned with precious stones. Re 17. 3-5. 18. 11-17. While the ancients rounded and polished precious stones, generally they do not seem to have angled, or faceted, them, as do craftsmen of modern times. The emery stone corundum or emery powder was employed by the Hebrews and Egyptians to polish precious stones. Often these were sculptured and engraved. The Hebrews apparently knew how to engrave precious stones long before their bondage in Egypt, where engraving was also an art. Judah's seal ring had evidently been engraved. GE 38. 18. For further discussions of ancient jewelry and ornaments, see anklet, beads, bracelet, brooch, earring, necklace, nose ring, ornaments, ring. Uses associated o textoi acute muritra longo. Jezebel 75 stones to be set with hard mortar, and mosaic pebbles, and every precious stone, and alabaster stones in great quantity. He made substantial contributions of materials, and the people in general also contributed. 1 Ch 29. 2-9. When Solomon built the temple, he overlaid the house with precious stone for beauty, or studded it with precious stones. 2 Ch 3. 6. Figurative use. The Apostle Paul, after identifying Jesus Christ as the foundation on which Christians should build, mentioned building materials of various kinds in connection with the Christian ministry. He indicated that the choice materials would include figurative precious stones capable of withstanding the force of fire. 1 Co 3. 10-15. Precious stones are sometimes used scripturally to symbolize qualities of heavenly or spiritual things or persons. The heavens were opened for Ezekiel, and in 2 visions he beheld 4 winged living creatures accompanied by 4 wheels, the appearance of each wheel being likened to the glow of chrysolite, that is, having a hue of yellow or possibly green. As 1. 1-6, 15, 16. 10. 9 Later, Daniel saw an angel, a certain man clothed in linen, whose body was like chrysolite. 10. 1, 4-6. Ezekiel also, when beholding a vision of Jehovah's glory, saw something in appearance like sapphire stone, a deep blue, the likeness of a throne. As 1. 25-28. 10. 1. The glory of Jehovah God himself is likened to the dazzling beauty of gemstones, for when the Apostle John beheld God's heavenly throne, he said, "The one seated is, in appearance, like a jasper stone and a precious red-colored stone, and round about the throne there is a rainbow like an emerald in appearance." We 4. 1-3, 9-11. The holy city, New Jerusalem, that is, the Lamb's wife, is represented as having a radiance like a most precious stone, as a jasper stone shining crystal clear. The 12 foundations of its wall were adorned with every sort of precious stone, a different stone for each foundation. Jasper, sapphire, chalcedony, emerald, sardonyx, sardius, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, hyacinth, and amethyst. The city's 12 gates were 12 pearls. Re 21. 2, 9-21. See separate articles on individual types of precious stones. Jezaniah, Jez middle dot a middle dot, and they are probably a shortened form of Yaezaniah, meaning Jehovah has given ear. A chief of the Judean military force among those submitting to Gedaliah's brief administration in 607 BCE. 40. 8, 9. 42. 1. Jezaniah is also called Azariah. 43. 2. Yaezaniah. 2 Kai 25. 23. Jezebel, Jez middle dot bel from Phoenician, possibly meaning where is the lofty one, that is, the prince. 1. Wife of Ahab, a king of Israel in the latter half of the 10th century BCE. She was a domineering queen who proved to be a strong advocate of Baalism at the expense of Jehovah's worship. In this she was like her father Ethbaal, the king of Sidon, evidently the one identified by the ancient historian Menander according to Josephus against Apion, I. 116, 123 as a priest of Astarte Ashtith, who gained the throne by murdering his own king. 1 Kai 16. 30, 31. Quite likely Ahab's marriage to this pagan princess Jezebel was for political reasons, without regard for the disastrous religious consequences. And after his having made such an alliance, it was only the next logical step in pleasing his devout Baal-worshipping wife to build a temple and altar for Baal, erect a phallic sacred pole, and then join her in this idolatrous worship. In all of this, Ahab did more to offend Jehovah than all the kings of Israel prior to him. 1 Kai 16. 32, 33. Jezebel, not satisfied that Baal worship was officially approved by the throne, endeavored to exterminate the worship of Jehovah from the land. To that end she ordered all the prophets of Jehovah killed, but God warned Elijah to escape across the Jordan, and Obadiah, the palace steward, hid 100 others in caves. 1 Kai 17. O textoi acute miritra longo, Jezza 76 stoned him to death. In this way Naboth was put to death by a perversion of justice. Ahab then seized the vineyard and prepared to turn it into a vegetable garden. 1 Kai 21. 8-16. For such wanton disregard for righteousness, Jehovah decreed that Ahab and his line of descent would be removed in a clean sweep of destruction. Without exception no one has proved to be like Ahab, who sold himself to do what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah, whom Jezebel his wife egged on. Hence, Jehovah's judgment against Jezebel. The very dogs will eat up Jezebel. 1 Kai 21. 17-26. In the course of time Ahab died and was succeeded first by Jezebel's son Ahijah, who ruled for 2 years, and then by another of her sons, Jehoram, who ruled for the next 12 years before Ahab's dynasty finally ended. 1 Kai 22. 40, 51-53. 2 Kai 1. 17. 3. 1 During the reigns of these sons, Jezebel, now in the role of Queen Mother, continued to influence the land with her fornications and sorceries. 2 Kai 9. 22 Her influence was even felt in Judah to the S, where her wicked daughter Athaliah, who had married Judah's king, perpetuated the Jezebel spirit in that southern kingdom for another 6 years after her mother's death. 2 Kai 8. 16-18, 25-27. 2 Ch 22. 2, 3. 24. 7. When the news reached Jezebel that Jehu had killed her reigning son Jehoram and was on his way to Jezreel, she artfully painted her eyes, adorned her hair, and framed herself in an upper window overlooking the palace square. There she greeted the conqueror upon his triumphal entry, saying, "Did it go all right with Zimri, the killer of his lord?" This sarcastic greeting was probably a veiled threat, for Zimri, after killing his king and usurping the throne, committed suicide 7 days later when his life was threatened.